Good morning. This side, we got it here. All right, we're gonna divide it in half. This side is good, this side is morning. Are we ready? Hold up, morning. You guys are doing great. Hold 1 second. Good morning. Let's try this again. All right, I felt the energy go up because you didn't want me to go any further, so we stopped. Put your hands together for yourselves for being here for the first live session of the day. You have successfully survived Monday night, like I like to call the party gauntlet. So congratulations. We're going to bring up our next session, harmonizing. I was there too. Harmonizing your tech stack and resident experience. Trevor Parks, our moderator, and the gentleman who come and join him as well and introduce themselves. Put your hands together for him.
Nice work, nice work. Thanks, Dennis.
Well, awesome. We're going to do quick intros. And I'm Trevor Park. I'm the VP of Marketing at Digital. And we got Dustin Lacey here, Paul Edgman, and Ben Stewart. If you guys want to do little intros about who you are, where you're from, and what your company's about.
Sure. Dustin Lacey, Vice President of Marketing Technology at a company in Arizona named Mark Taylor Residential. We are owner-operators, about 30,000 units, exclusively Class A.
Awesome. Hey everybody, I'm Paul Edgman. I'm SVP of Marketing for Thrive Communities based in Seattle. We are third-party management exclusively, about 23,000 units, 150 buildings under management. So, go ahead.
Good morning. It's good to see you all this morning bright and early. I'm Ben. I'm one of the co-founders of Revise. We are a software company modernizing vendor management.
Nice. So we're going to just kick it off. Jumping in, Paul, how do you even know that your tech stack might not be in lockstep? Like, what are the signs that you're noticing, red flags that you see? Like, what are the things that are indicating that you need to maybe actually fix a leak?
Yeah, great question. Just realized we had mimosas.
Oh yeah, don't forget to drink your mimosas.
Yeah, so that's not bad. I think if you're not realizing that your tech stack may have some issues, I think you're probably not looking. And I've just spoken from our experience. There are a lot of things and a lot of complexities that we'll get into shortly with the logistics of tech stacks and multifamily. I think things are improving, but I'm a big Instagram guy, unfortunately. Watch a lot of content on memes, and I think it's that, that meme, if you guys have seen this, like, if I win the lotto, I won't tell you, but there'll be signs. It's like, McLaren pulls up in the McDonald's drive-through. Like, your tech stack is that McLaren. Like, there's probably something very obvious that's not working quite right. And I think it's just a matter of being really deliberate and systematic about identifying those issues. And I think for us, like, just some quick things that we try to do to remain successful. Hiring systems and marketing folks directly from our on-site teams. I think about 60 to 75% of our systems and marketing teams come from on-site directly, so we get that perspective. And then literally making decisions like at the corporate executive level based on team feedback, resident feedback specifically. I think those are this is table stakes stuff, obviously. I promise we'll get into more content, but that's kind of our initial take on it.
Yeah. Dustin, what about you? What are the signs or the friction points that you experience?
Challenge for us was we adopted a centralized operating motion starting in 2018, and we started to ask questions that the software couldn't provide. And at that time, it felt like software was a bit of a laggard. We felt like we were kind of out front on this notion that centralization might be an optimal approach for us from an operating model standpoint. And we needed success metrics that we could trust. And we needed tooling that would enable us to do the things that we needed to do in terms of moving towards a more specialized role in terms of operating models. So the challenge for us at that time was when we looked at all the off-the-shelf type of products that were available, very few kind of met the need of that moment. Whereas today, you're seeing kind of a harmonization of the prop tech providers and the big software providers. directionally with their customer, us, because of, this, I think, shift in thinking. And never more than today are we seeing kind of that collective effort in shaping product that allows, folks like Mark Taylor to really tackle big changes like an operational shift. We're touching lead gen, lead management, resident management, collections, IT, and the big bite is service, obviously. And it's really neat to kind of see these providers reach out and go, hey, we're early stage in product development, and we'd like to hear your voice. That's really important for us because at the end of the day, when you're running a centralized operating model, immediacy and enablement are what you need to be able to provide. And you need to have data and insights that you can trust because we all seek kind of one thing as owner-operators, and that's peace of mind at the end of the day.
How do you find employee feedback to be kind of like an indicator for you? Is it something that throws you off, or is it something that actually is like a North Star?
I wish we had more of it. It's
Yeah.
really helpful, actually. It takes time to really dig into workflows and understand how folks are using software. It's true. I mean, your operating team is just going to find workarounds
Yeah.
for those kind of high friction areas within the software, and before you know it, it's software that you bought with a kind of a singular purpose to be used in a certain way, and folks aren't really using it that way, and therefore it's not delivering kind of the outcomes that you're wanting. It is important that amongst all else that you're doing, you spend time in the trenches, on-prem, and for us in our centralized offices, kind of unpacking the way they're using software. That's really telling as you're starting to make more and more decisions and stack these layers of decision making when you're moving into this model like we are. And so they're very important to that process.
Cool. Ben, I wanted to jump over you. You have a really unique perspective where you're getting under the hood of the entire company when you're diving into contracts with Revise. What are some of the common elements or themes that you're seeing when you're going through these contracts and you're evaluating tech stacks, especially when it's these overlapping services because one department wanted a solution that just did something slightly different or vice versa? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so there's a couple of cool points on this. First is our industry was historically viewed as like a tech laggard, right? It's been a thing for a number of companies. But we were forced through COVID. We were forced through this digital adoption really quickly, right? And I think the thing that's unique about our industry is there's no real CIO oversight in multifamily. You've got department level purchasing. And so as you've got this unique combination of decentralized purchasing, department level purchasing, and forced digital adoption through COVID, and all of a sudden things like touring technology, rent, deposit alternatives, you've got access control, was really forced upon us, right? So now we've ended up with well over 100 different software providers to run our business, and I mean that's a ton to keep track of, right? And especially when it is disjointed, with no real CIO, CTO oversight.
Are you saying you're worried about us marketing folks making tech?
I would say with the exception of some of the very sophisticated operators that sit here, which actually do oversee marketing and technology, right, or marketing and systems, which is in both of these instances.
I think it's a really good point. I think that you have different silos in property management making really unique, focused decisions on tech stacks. I mean, you have the operations side, looking at risk mitigation and team enablement, looking at centralization, which I think that's buzzwords aside. I think a really interesting thing to look at in terms of how it forces you to be more efficient with your tech stack, even if you're exploring centralization or using it in one area of your business. I think it forces you to do a deep dive into how, if you're a Yardi shop, your core PMS is integrating across channels to make sure you can do centralized lease renewals. Because if you have a process that's uncovered throughout that, say you're using Onsite for lease renewals, and then it has to integrate with Yardi, but there's a step there that an Onsite person has to execute. You want to centralize it. All of a sudden, you can't do that unless it's dialed in better. So it forces you to take that kind of like next step in the process. But I think with the fragmentation, you don't always get that CIO level oversight. You know, it's always different between third party and you know, in-house like owner-based management. But I think we all have lots of challenges around that.
What's that process like actually when you come to like integrating a new tool, let's say like AI or some new tech that's coming in, and you want to figure out how to incorporate that within the entire company? What are the first things that you start to look at? Who are the first people that you bring into that conversation before even getting to like contract signature? What's the steps?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, all of us have strategic objectives. Everything we're doing tucks into, at Mark Taylor, our core 3 strategic objectives. We have to understand what the outcome we seek is, and from that, everything kind of, the decision making it kind of falls in line with that. And the second piece is, you know, because there's no way, wasted motion sucks in an organization, and we've all got plenty to do. So making sure that it tethers well to your strategic objectives, and then I think it's really important to understand what your success metrics are. How are you evaluating success here? Really defining that is important. I think you learn a lot when you start to talk to these potential partners. And obviously there's all kinds of, you know, peripheral questions you need answered. Are they in fact integrated with my technology stack? Those are all key things that you're going to find out on the front end before you dive into this, because especially today with this kind of headlong push into centralized, software is definitely catching up to a lot of the movement, specifically for us. So we're almost, you know, flying the plane as we're building it. But knowing your success metrics, knowing what good looks like, having the ability to understand that with this software partner is critical. When you're in the process of evaluating software partners, ask them, you know, how do you, when you're demonstrating value, what do you point to with your product? And make sure those align with what you're trying to do. If they do, then you have a product that's probably going to meet your needs, right? And then the third piece is you don't just jump in and, you know, date a little bit. There's a little courting that goes on. It's probably important, and I know vendors hate hearing this, but, you know, there's a reason property trials matter, because you want to surface kind of the unseen. Everything sounds great in the sales presentation, but once you set it live wild, it's important to see if, in fact, the software is delivering what you need. And then you can make an intelligent decision as to whether there's a full rollout imminent, or you're going to press pause and perhaps need to look at something else, or maybe even go the harder route, which is co-develop software with a partner.
Ben, on the reverse side of that, for the vendor perspective, like what are you needing from the PMC to help kind of manage that relationship? Because I think communication obviously is important, and having the expectations as to what your goals and metrics are to align with what the product actually is. What do the vendors need on that side?
I think we've got to be aware of competing incentives or different incentives. A vendor is incentivized by retention, net dollar retention, cross-sell, growth. They don't understand your business like you understand your business, right? So there's competing incentives there. And in fact, I mean, transparently through the lens of a vendor, there's been many a conversation where we've said, hey, this operator's coming up for renewal. Should we tell them? Don't tell them. Don't tell them we're coming up for renewal, right? So I think in terms of communication, we almost need to flip the balance of power back to the operator, right? To where the operator is saying, who's responsible for this vendor success? Like, who's responsible, like in terms of roles and responsibilities, for making sure, even post-implementation, that this vendor's like iterating with us, growing with us, is aligned to our business objectives long term. I think historically there's been a big dependence on the vendor to do a QBR where their motivation is very different from yours, right? And I think we need to flip that communication back in the power of the operator.
That's awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to keep some sort of transparency within this process. And I want to jump over to you, Paul. You had a program that you rolled out that tied in a lot of different elements within your company, and even down to the resident side of things that was involving community engagement, online reputation. There were a lot of elements that you pulled into that for reporting success on that. How did technology play a role in that? And can you tell us a little bit about the program?
Yeah, so I think a good segue from what we were just talking about is just looking at things from the perspective of the resident life cycle and how you can make an impact in those different key kind of inflection points in the resident life cycle. So I think an example of that, just to get to like tangibles, we were trying to solve for the fact that it's really difficult to get tangible conversions for survey requests post like key action points in the resident cycle. So tours, move-ins, maintenance requests, like all of those key points. So we utilize a fully integrated reputation platform, with Yardi, and we were always asking for feedback at those points where nobody was taking that next step to do that. And we get NPS scores out of that help dictate like our team's, pay on site, success rates. We get Google reviews, which obviously don't have to preach to this room about the significance of Google reviews. And it was just really difficult to see. We send out thousands of these things, we didn't get any feedback. So we, in the spirit of trying to like leverage kind of a feel-good, like company-aligned initiative, one of the Thrive values is do the right thing. So we were working on like, okay, we also need to really leverage our ESG program. So we put together this program called One Review, One Tree, where we essentially committed to planting a tree or native species plant for every Google review that's executed on after a request. So since then, it's been, I think, like 14 months or so since we rolled it out, and it basically doubled our conversion rates from the SMS request at those inflection points to the execution of Google reviews. It didn't really slightly change the sentiment, like a little more positive. People maybe think, oh, that landlord might be a little less awful because they plant things, which is great, always for all of us. And I mean, it's that kind of thing where it's like we got lucky with a pretty decent idea, and I think it wouldn't have been possible without the integrations in place because it was more of a passive solution. Like it didn't require our teams to lift a finger to do this. Like it's all fully integrated and it's all dialed in. So I think that's just like, it hits one small section of the greater situation. But I think if we can all do more things like that to kind of help like mitigate and like improve the resident life cycle, I think we'll be very successful.
Wait, so you guys would plant a tree for every review or every favorable review?
That's a great point. We're trying to be white hat about this, so it's every review. So even if they absolutely flame us, we'll still be out there in the dirt. I mean, and luckily we have like local scale, so we actually partner with like King County and Seattle to actually physically plant the trees with like our volunteer arm. And it's been a really fun, like team building, like engaging event too, which is obviously not tech centric, but I mean, that kind of stuff.
How many trees are you at?
We're at 2350.
That's sizable.
We're a little bit in the red because we've gotten like 3,000 reviews since then, so we have a little bit of makeup to
work
it.
up.
Honestly, it's planting season right now, so we're gonna get after it.
See you out in the forest. That's awesome. I think it speaks to the thought process that you have with the tech stack of how seamless it was for a rollout and that your teams didn't feel that friction. So I think that's also where when you roll out new programs and initiatives that might not be tech forward, if they roll out seamlessly or there's no friction points, that also goes to show that you are thinking about your tech stacks on the holistic front. I want to open this up to kind of the full group of really diving into like what's next, like where are tech innovations going and how do we prepare for them? There was a lot of chat about AI over the last few years, and companies are really trying to figure out how do they incorporate AI and automation into their tech stacks in a seamless way where there's not a lot of friction points and then the on-site teams don't feel like their jobs are being replaced. And so what tech's coming next do you see down the pipeline, and what are you guys doing to prepare for it?
Tech is certainly, so AI is going to be an augment to start and may downstream become a full replacement for a lot of, specifically from a communication standpoint. There's just so much now at our disposal in terms of the power of generative and what it can do. We are very happy with what we're seeing from an external facing standpoint. Just exposing our chatbot to larger corpuses of data allows it a much more versatility in being able to answer the required questions, not just kind of the explicit, those like 200 questions everybody asks. Those apartment seekers will ask, and it's really about 50 questions. But being able to deploy AI now from a voice standpoint, the technology is now there, and you're going to start to see folks leveraging voice leasing assistants, probably in much of the same way we're tackling it. Voicemail first. Anything's better than voicemail. At Mark Taylor, if we don't answer our phones, probability of converting a lead to a lease, if we miss the call, is about 2%. If we answer it, it's a magnitude more, it's 25+%. It's that important, just to do the simple fundamental things. And it's a deal killer if you don't answer your phone. So plugging AI in at the back end from voicemail standpoint, nobody likes IVRs. Introducing leasing assistant on the front end is going to be helpful. If you guys look at our call answer rates in our country, on average, and I think it was at this conference last year, they said our average call answer rates at a property nationwide is 30 to 40%. I mean, it's really low. And if you consider the cost per lead, that's perilous. And so I see AI playing a bigger role on the front end or public facing. And then on the back end, AI is a real augment from a leasing standpoint. Automation, nurture, ensuring timely response. In Phoenix, for the next couple of years, we've got a bit of an oversupply problem. It's all Class A. It's very competitive. You have to be clean with your lead management. It's very important. So if we can listen to your phone call with AI while you're on the phone with a prospect, and we're surfacing your answers in real time because we're transcribing, so you're not having to dig these answers up. If you're perhaps new, and everybody in this industry that works for a PMC knows that the entry-level positions in our industry turn over to a great degree.
I think we're at 36%.
It can be higher. It's upwards to 50% for some folks. And so, the lifeblood of your property is lead management, I have to believe, to maintain occupancy. And if you're not doing that piece well, it causes problems everywhere else. And so I think you're going to start to see AI augment communication, education. You're going to see real improvements to kind of the speed of communication because you're able to deploy automation and nurture. And you're going to see cool ways that it's utilized. Like, what about that lead that didn't sign with you 9 months ago, but they're coming up on their lease end with whomever they chose? Are you following back up with them? After all, you paid for that lead 9 months ago. Why not see if you can extract more value from it? If you have AI doing that on your behalf, you may be generating additional deal flow for your property that doesn't cost you anything additionally. So there's all kinds of neat ways that technology, and that's just AI, but there's all kinds of really neat ways that technology is, we're seeing technology deployed, and we're hopeful it's going to continue.
How are you finding that with employee adoption? Are you seeing hesitation for the employees to kind of get into those new systems, or are they willing to? Service
side's pretty resistant because, they're grizzled old dudes and gals that like their autonomy and kind of, there's aspects of the role. I mean, they have high agency, they go and get stuff done on their own, and now you tether them to technology, and that's not seen as something super favorable. But if you're able to expose, look, from a strategic objective standpoint, here's where we're going. In order for us to get there in the time frame we desire, these are some of the things we're going to have to do. It's going to be an enhancer. It's about communicating heavily the why behind this. It's not an electronic leash. It's meant to make your job easier, provide you more visibility, make you more effective, more efficient. And those are aspects of one's job that most people would, desire. So if you frame it correctly, earlier than later, the job insecurity issue that you note and some of the other things become more, it becomes easier to kind of deal with those. It's still a challenge. Technology is inherently unsettling for some folks who are change averse. So heavy communication plays a big role in that.
Paul, what about you? Anything on Thrive?
Yeah, I mean, all really good points. I think our main focus, on the new tech side, I think that touches like all the AI centralization. Make sure you can check all those. Our rollouts have all been focused around how we can really internally market the fact that we're going to roll out like a passive technology solution. And by that, I mean something that will make the team's life easier without an additional login or without, an additional like step in their workflow. So we've been super successful with the rollouts we were able to accomplish, whether it's a new CRM or something as big as that, or something as small as like a rent rewards program, in the payment portal, like those things, as long as there's not a lift for the team, I know I keep going back to that, but we can really internally sell that. I mean, I think you always kind of have to sell any initiative and any new thing, like internally, externally. For us, we have to sell it to the clients as well, to make sure it's defensible position. But that tactic, just really like coming at it with that approach, like we're going to make your life easier. We're going to make it so you have more time to spend with human-based interactions. With retention being low, like we want our teams to be able to like have that FaceTime with people where they're actually affecting conversion rates and they're actually having really meaningful phone calls, or they're bringing people flowers on their birthday and all those fun things. Like that's what we want our teams to be doing, not like grinding in a CRM and doing win-back campaigns like Dustin was talking about. Like we don't want them doing that. We want them to feel like they're like high-performing, like impactful team players that then I think helps them feel more fulfilled, at least from what we've experienced, and then kind of helps them like, hopefully stay longer at the company or in multifamily. I mean, we're all kind of in this together, right? Like people love to just fly out of the multifamily industry at their first chance. So let me make it more appealing. Hopefully you can affect change and make it more retention based. Yeah.
I think we're going to have to change the way we look at technology adoption and the time horizon through which we look at it, right? Like I think historically we've looked at it as friction point solution, and this is how we've ended up with so many disparate data silos and disparate systems. And I think if we look at like longer term horizon, we look at AI adoption, like AI will fundamentally change how we deliver value to our customers. But I think before we think about innovation, we got to think about the data sets today, right? Because AI is only going to be as good as the data that we can feed it. And so, like in order to really truly be disruptive, I think today we have to start thinking about data layers, owning our data. We're seeing a lot of news about APIs into PMSs right now. And I think that the more sophisticated operators are going to start investing into that data layer where they can ingest everything from their disparate systems, own that data to do what they please with, and then longer term that will feed predictive AI, prescriptive AI. You look at some products, DemandX, RealPage, bringing together revenue management with funnel math in the CRM, with demand metrics from your advertising provider. That starts getting really interesting, right? If you can get predictive with what may happen there and then prescriptive with spend, well, that's something that could totally overhaul how we spend money in our industry. You look at Archer AI, which is a Bend-based company. They can ingest a T12. They can reasonably and pretty accurately predict NOI from the asset. Then they can start predicting the best time to sell the asset, right? So I think there is a whole host of innovation coming down our way. I think we have to think today more about the foundational data that will support it longer term. And I think the other interesting thing here is we're in a really attractive vertical. Like real estate is a $1 trillion industry, right? And as things like no-code AI applications hit, where you can actually build software using natural language, the proliferation of providers is just going to be exponential. So we're going to have to be really disciplined with what we adopt, how we adopt it, in light of the long-term view.
So touching on the plethora of tech that's coming into our industry, we can't take it all on at once. Like it's going to overwhelm our teams. It's going to just completely get them turned off to the idea of new rollouts every single month. What are you guys doing to make sure that you're not overwhelming your teams, you're not burning them out with a new product every single month, every single quarter? How do you decide what tech to do? And then what's that process look like to get them comfortable with adopting those programs?
Where do you start? I think you have to understand the entire effort from a macro view, and it's important to solve for small wins, I think, on the front end. At Mark Taylor, we started with lead gen. That was where we started in 2018. We wanted to own that completely, see if we could do that better, allow us to move off of ILSs, and we've been ILS independent since 2018 because we simply employ a dual website footprint. We have a much smaller digital footprint, but it's one that we control in full and have the ability to do any number of things in real time. That was a win, and you start to build momentum. It's important to really vet your product, your potential partners with the trial. I think that's critical. It's not a good look when the corporate office rolls something down the hill and it's a poor fit. We've all done it, and it's easy to do. You also have to remember you're not going to please everybody. And we operate large organizations, and it should make sense with your kind of the prevailing goals for the business. If you've done your homework with the partners, asked the right questions, trialed the products, built out a strong rollout. You can kill everything with a poor rollout strategy. It could be a great product, but if you roll it out poorly, that's a deal killer. One of the critical questions you're going to want to ask when you're in this process is what support looks like, not only on the front end with this potential partner, but on an ongoing basis, because software breaks, and that's a really critical piece that can sometimes make or break an effort. And despite the software being great and doing it, invariably it will break at some point. And how they react is important. Sometimes we feel like at the corporate office we're kind of constantly shaping narrative and managing optics around things, because some of these things are large changes and they can strike fear in folks because of the job insecurity. But if you look at the natural attrition rates in our industry, and I'm not saying at the corporate office, but on-prem, in 2 years you're going to have folks who know nothing different than this new software. So you just got to get through that rough spot, message clearly, tie it to the objectives, make sure you do that well, and make sure you've done your diligence with the potential partners so that you don't get caught in something where you were overpromised and then they inevitably kind of underdeliver.
Do you have anybody on your properties that still know about carbon copies and fax machines? Or
So that was pre-me. I never actually saw that era.
Okay.
I've heard about it. It sounds awful. But yeah.
I want to open it up a little bit to Q&A. We have one question that came through the app. If you guys have a question, feel free to raise your hand. We have a roaming mic. Feel free to also throw something into the app itself. But the question we have is, how do you handle completely tech-resistant residents? And while that's happening, somebody can respond, and I'm going to top off Paul and Ben's drinks.
Tech-resistant residents? Well, I can tell you this. So from a centralized standpoint, we've been moving to hybrid models. We have concierges that manage pods and properties, and we reduce the staff footprint. That's the goal, right? The underlying goal for the centralized piece is improve performance while simultaneously kind of extracting costs. And when you have density like we do in Phoenix, you've got a lot of redundancy. One property may be very busy on a Tuesday and the other two aren't. And so trying to calibrate on that and size that is kind of challenging. But we've arrived at a place where we're now in what we call a hybrid operating model, where we have reduced staff footprint. And in some cases, we've fully closed Class A properties. And yes, you get about 5 or 6 residents who've been there for a while that love to chat. They come in and chat with you. And suddenly you take that from them, and there's a bit of loss there. Another challenge for us has been, specifically from a centralized standpoint, with our residents who comprise probably or make up about 75 to 80% of our inbound communication. If you don't answer a resident phone call, God forbid, they're going to cluster call you about 5 more times in the next 15 minutes, which is going to destroy your call answer rates and those different things. And so one of the things we've done at Mark Taylor is move them towards alternative communication channels so that we can, be more responsive, do some of these different things. And that has taken, a full kind of communication effort to do that. So yeah, new technology can be scary for any of your stakeholders, but if you message it well, it's something you can overcome.
Yeah, I think for us on the resident side, we try to limit anything that impacts. It's just the sheer volume of people is a little bit daunting when you're speaking of residents, in companies our size. And we try to be very careful about what does touch them and kind of changes their workflow. And then I think we provide opportunities for them to, be more involved or, do more with the systems we kind of put in place there. If they want to kind of have more of an open communication on a resident thread or something, they can do that in the portal. But we're really careful not to overwhelm them with things. And I think the thing we've had success with, which is what you were talking about, was opening up and like meeting them on their own kind of desired channels. Like we had good success. We fully enabled all our CRM numbers to be SMS enabled and allow and encourage residents to text us their concerns. And, you know, we can kind of respond to them more. Like we can have like centralized teams help with the queues more than like a phone call situation. And that was something that I think, at least in our demographic, like in Seattle and Portland, like people really just want to pick up the phone and text. Like it's a lot. I mean, most of us probably prefer that versus a phone call. Not that you know, can totally get rid of that, but that was a good way for us to just like, you know, if you have a problem, you need a maintenance request, you can't handle the tech, like just text us and our team will help you do it. You avoid them, you know, calling 17 times and all that fun stuff. So I think just meeting them where they are.
Well, how much do you feel like the leasing team should be tech support versus the actual vendor solution? Because like, I have a Verizon phone or a Verizon cell phone plan, but I have an Apple iPhone. I don't call Verizon when I have a problem with Apple. Like,
Tech support for the residents? Ooh,
yeah.
Hopefully you're not in that position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
You
not a
want
good
to
look.
avoid that.
But like,
I think that's
like,
one of the reasons.
How do I use my payment portal? How do I use my resident app? Like, is that stuff that should be baked into the program itself so that it trains the resident on how to use the program? Or should the leasing agent be the one that's responsible for showing them how?
I think it would be fantastic if it was baked in, but I think a lot of times the teams end up being support on that. Where we do draw a hard line, at least on our side, is like on telecom and stuff like that. Like we, you know, Comcast, like, you know, Astound, whatever is in your market, like we're not gonna help with that. Like that's something, you chose this service, like go forward. But I really think vendors, you know,
Yeah.
that's a super helpful thing.
That's an area of opportunity for vendors for sure, right? Like in-app guided navigation is big outside of our industry.
Yeah.
Companies like Intercom, like big horizontal software providers, that should absolutely play into multifamily where, you know, the first time you open up the app, it's got this guided navigation through. But I think the thing we've got to realize is tech fatigue is real. It's real for the leasing agents, but it's also real for the residents too. It's got to have like really clean UX UI. It's got to be intuitive. It's got to make them want to come back. And I think we're starting to see some agnostic platforms where others can integrate into, right? Where you don't have to have 4 or 5 different applications. You can have one resident branded application where everything else integrates into. And I think we're going to see a lot more movement into that.
Well, so that brings up an interesting question that was also brought into this. How do you get them to play nice? PMS systems being kind of like that central hub for a lot of these tech solutions. How do you get them to work nicely with one another? Like, what is that secret sauce to say, hey, this is something we really want, but we need it in Entrata, we need it in RealPage, we need it in Yardi, so that it works seamlessly, and that it's not also putting these startups out, because I think it's pretty expensive for integrations to happen, and I think Entrata just rolled out that they're going to be charging for their integrations as well. Like, how do we make it so that these startups have a fighting chance to actually prove some solutions?
I mean, it's a tough challenge for them. Integrations take work, they cost money for both parties, and there has to be market fit for the product with the PMS provider. You can sponsor all day. We're large enough that we can, you know, we do sponsor and have sponsored numerous integrations, but it has to make sense for the PMS provider as well. And it can't, you know, their challenge is that a lot of these products are competing products. So, you know, sometimes that's a deal breaker. If the obviously, if the integration doesn't exist, it's a deal breaker. You know, it's one thing if they don't have the integration and you, as the customer, have the power to kind of sponsor it with your PMS provider. And certainly, I would urge you all to ask when you guys recognize, hey, here's an upstart, you know, prop tech product that we think could be useful, and approach your PMS partner on it. Maybe they already have plans or other customers asking for the same thing. But yeah, that can be very challenging.
I would echo that. It's got to be operator-led, right? And we're obviously in this spot right now. We're a startup. We're talking with every major provider about integrating, and the partners where we have a loud voice saying, hey, we need this to get better data. We need this to access our contracts. You know, we need to access our spend in a more digestible format as it pertains to our vendors. The PMSs have to be receptive to that, right? As an operator, lead the charge, put your foot down. It's helpful for the startup ecosystem for sure. And the cost is the cost. I mean, I see both sides of that story, right? Like yes, it's expensive, but it's also nice to have clean and modern APIs with webhooks, with good data access, and that takes time to maintain. So I think on the vendor side also, shout out to Propexo. They're an integrations as a service company that are standardizing data across PMS providers and maintaining all of the APIs, maintaining them to all of the recent updates, and making it a little bit easier for startups to have an integrate into one, which will integrate into many. But yeah, pleading with the operators, make it easy for your startup vendor partners.
Yeah. Paul, you have a question here.
Hi. Hey, Ben. Paul Bergeron. You said earlier in the session something about should we tell them that their contract is up for renewal? What did you mean by that? Is that you don't want to face the hard truth? Is it mean it's automatically renewed? What are you getting at there?
Yeah, so as a vendor, you're measured on, I mean, vendors have, account management teams, customer success teams, that become the primary interface between vendor and company, right, customer. And as a vendor, you're measured on net dollar retention, right, which is the sum of net new bookings, churn, and cross-sell. And so their incentive coming into every single QBR with you is, can I potentially cross-sell more products to this customer? Can I upsell this customer? Am I maintaining this customer? And I can tell you, like, churn's a huge worry right now. Like, access to capital has changed, VC funding has changed, expectations on growth have changed. And so, I mean, I've been part of many a conversation where the vendors just wanted to put their head in the sand, knowing that a renewal is coming up, and maybe there's a better product on the market now, right? So I think operators, by mapping their tech stack, by getting renewal reminders, they're able to kind of flip the balance of power and say, well, hey, we are happy with this and we do want to renew, but we do want an early negotiation on the renewal price, or look, we're not happy with this. We need to consider shopping the ecosystem because technology's evolved over the last few years materially.
We're getting a lot of questions around tech stack, and so full transparency, cards on the table. Can each of you share where your PMS is, what CRM you're using, and kind of what your tech stack looks like today? And then ultimately, like, is that your dream tech stack, or are you looking to make some variations? And like, don't have to say where, but you can also, if you want to be full transparent.
Yeah. So before I do that, I'll just say that we see a lot of value in a single point solution. So fully integrated product where you've been able to take all these kind of disparate software services and they're embedded in one software platform so that you can then start to generate insights and utilize that data in ways that are helpful for you from an operating standpoint. So we've been a resume house from a PMS standpoint since I think 14 or 15. Previous we'd been on Yardi. We really like the platform because it truly is an open platform. They're not onerous from their integration standpoints. It's a really good accounting tool as well. So we like that. Everything we do from a centralized standpoint is with Union. So our centralized CRM, chatbot, voice assistant, lease execution, competitive intelligence, websites, all of that flows from in and through that platform. And then on the service side, we've partnered with a group called HappyCo, who's doing some really interesting stuff right now with their AI, centralized scheduling, AI, but it's going to save us a couple hours a day in terms of organizing our property service teams' days. So those are kind of our core three horses.
Nice. Paul?
Yeah, I'll run through it quick since I know we're close on time. But so we, as third party, we inherit a lot of properties. I think we had 50 property transitions to Thrive in the last 30 months. And so we inherit a lot of tech stacks, and the decision becomes like, how do we bring consistency and integration to that? So our proven stack, from our perspective, starting I guess with a core, would be Yardi Voyager. We've been on Yardi for 16 years, kind of an accounting-founded company, so it's very core to our workflow to have Voyager there. And then from there, Rent Cafe integration. On the resident kind of like onboarding side, we're actually more of a real page shop until you get to the point of like lease execution and like move-in charges. So we're gonna have Knox CRM on the front end, and then like on-site leasing automation and screening. So that then moves into Rent Cafe as soon as they become a resident, essentially, which has been a thing that works well for us, at least at this point. But it's been a continuously evolving situation, I'll say, and I won't get into the specifics of all the others. But if you have questions about what we're doing in terms of like, you know, websites and marketing and like all that rest of that stack, I don't want to belabor the point here, but feel free to reach out, and I can very transparent about what we're using and not using. And I think, you know, integrations are key to all of it. As long as you're fully integrated across that core, like that is really the key to success, in my opinion.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. We